Hey everybody, it's Cynthia from Chiefology. So there's a question that oftentimes, regardless of where you are in an organization, what level, if you are not the CEO, a thought goes through your mind, is it potentially easier to be the CEO than a general employee or whatever that employee position is? That can raise some interesting dialogue. Is it easier to be the CEO than a general employee? I think at first thought it seems like an ideal position to be in, and there are many who will aspire to that particular role. Then there are those who get into the role and realize it's a little bit different. And there are those that certainly prepare a long, long, long time and are groomed for it and know exactly what they're getting into by the time they get there, which is usually the case in most often. So the areas, I want to boil it down. There are many, many, many areas that we could talk about, or different pros and cons. I'm going to boil it down to three. They're going to be the three N's. We're going to talk about influence, insight, and income. That's the one that usually folks gravitate toward first, but we're going to save that for last. So let's talk about influence first. It is true that in the CEO role, in that top spot within an organization, you have a tremendous amount of influence or impact. You have the ability to really move the organization. You're determining the direction that the organization is going, and you are the one who gets to turn the ship and move in that direction and make things really happen. Now, obviously, in whatever role you're in the organization, you can have influence and impact, and you can influence your area, and you may be able to very often influence beyond your area. But it's at that top level seat where you do have tremendous amount of influence to be able to guide. Let's take a look at the other side of that now. So with that degree of authority, that level of influence, also comes incredible responsibility and accountability. It is tremendous. And I hear from CEOs again and again and again, especially those who have recently transitioned into the role. When I talk with them and we're looking kind of back retrospectively on that transition, the thing that I hear most is that they were surprised by is the weight, how it just feels so different and much heavier once they get into that role. That was the piece that they didn't expect, because now that they are in that big chair, the moment that transition occurs, everything about the organization rests on their shoulders. Certainly, they have wonderful folks underneath them. They have the rest of the executive team. They have the rest of the workforce. But ultimately, it comes down to the weight is on their shoulders to really guide that ship. So that's the con. So you can have that influence, but also there's that immense responsibility and accountability. And it's also part of that is that there's never enough time in the day. Your to-do list is exhaustive, and you can't really turn it off. It's just always present, always there. It's very difficult to walk away from it, turn it off, even take a vacation without thinking about it or having to respond to something. So that's the first area, influence. Second area, insight. So in that top level position, that CEO role, you do have a tremendous amount of insight and knowledge because you have the view of the entire organization. Most employees never get that luxury. They get to know their respective area very, very well. They may get to know some other areas of the organization quite well based on who they interact with most, and how they learn and how they cooperate with one another in order to get the results that are needed. But it's really that chief level role, especially the CEO, that gets that broad organizational view, that sees it all of the verticals and how they also need to work together horizontally. And that's a unique position to be in. So that's a pro. On the pro side, you get that insight. On the con side for that is that it can be very lonely at the top. Now that's a saying that gets thrown around very often, but the reason it gets thrown around very often is because it's very accurate. And again, in the conversations and the research that I do on new CEOs, that is another theme that comes up again and again and again, is that it's very lonely. Because even if they came up from within the organization, some will come from outside, obviously, but even if they came up from within and they have a number of relationships developed, solid relationships that they've built over time, because they're now in a different seat, they they can't have the same conversations that they had before. It's a different dynamic, it's a different interaction, and so they can't bounce things around different folks at different levels the way they previously had. Now they can get input, certainly listen, gather information, but when they are thinking about direction and when they are making some tough decisions that are not really the team decisions, they are an individual decision, because there are some of those, it's very lonely at the top, and they're the ones that have to make that decision. So it gets important for them to have a support network outside of the organization, either of other CEOs or other type of trusted confidant, like a trusted advisor, or services such as we provide, so they make sure they have a sounding board to be able to have that level of support and not feel so lonely at the top. Third area was the other income. So let's talk about salary for a moment. And really it goes broader than that. It's not just about the money, although yes, that can be very lucrative and it can be wonderful. And having been in a C-level position, I know how wonderful that can be and very appealing. There's also the status side of it. Being in that role, it is high status, and some people really want that and need that, and that's fine. So that's the good side of it. The other side of that is, yeah, you are the face, the front of the organization. You have that status. And when something does not go well, then the fingers are pointing directly at you, and you potentially have a very public failure. So you can have very public successes, although frankly you need to be giving credit to everyone else within the organization who is helping to achieve that success, so spreading the accolades around. But oftentimes when it's a failure, it seems much more individual, and folks are really looking at you as the head of that organization. So that's more on the con side. Those are some things to think about. So is it a wonderful role? Absolutely. If you have the right temperament for it, if you have the interest in it, then absolutely continue growing and grooming yourself toward that role. It's a great place to be. Those of you who are in the role, you're doing yeoman's work. Thank you for your service to your organization. And be sure to acknowledge, regardless of what role you are in within the organization, there are pros and cons of all of them. And so just be aware of what the upsides and the downsides are, and try to be your best self in the role that you are right now, and know what your plan is going forward, what role you want to achieve, aspire to, and make sure you're developing the knowledge, the skills, and getting the experience to be able to get you from here to there. So thanks. Talk to you later.